Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, an almanac of garden history, literature, and small botanical joys. I'm Jennifer Ebling, and today is July 22nd. When I first started gardening, I was mad for scabiosa, those little pincushion flowers. I couldn't get enough. But daylilies? I didn't like them at all. Too common, I remember thinking. Flowers of ill repute. I didn't want something that everyone else had. Well, these days, I won't plant scabiosa because it never comes back for me, and I got tired of buying it every June on repeat. Besides, in the spring, I'd rather get my early color with flowering shrubs. And the daylilies that I used to turn my nose up at, they're all through my garden now. And this time of year, I'm grateful for every bit of their July resilience. To me, they almost seem shrub-like, as reliable as the hydrangea, and color from a mile away. I'm not fickle when it comes to plants, really, I'm not. But over the years, the garden just changed me. And that's something I try to remember. The garden changes, and so do we. We can be one thing one season and something else the next. Here's today's garden history. It was on this day in 1823 that the American naturalist William Bartram died in his Philadelphia garden at the age of 84. His family found him under a tree. He was born to a Quaker family in 1739. His father was John Bartram, the farmer who had found horticultural success and founded the first botanical garden in North America. But William had a rougher go of things as he entered adulthood. He failed as a plantation owner in Florida. He failed as a merchant. And the trading post he started in North Carolina didn't last. His family started calling him Poor Billy. But for all that, he was gentle and likable, a gifted artist and writer. His botanical illustrations were so good that Carl Linnaeus, the father of taxonomy, used them in his work. Then, in 1772, William got the big break he'd been hoping for. He was hired to explore the American South as a plant collector. His mission was to gather seeds, draw plants, and keep a journal. He was deep in the South when the American Revolution began, though he didn't hear of the battles of Lexington and Concord for weeks. He was too busy watching cranes fly through the sky and stand still on the riverbanks. Alongside the flowers and trees he was the first to write about. When the war started, William was a British subject. But when he returned home in January of 1777, he was a citizen of a new nation called America. He spent the next 10 years writing about his trip in great detail. Bartram's Travels came out in 1791, and it was the first work of environmental literature published in the United States. At home, the response was tepid, but across the pond, it was a huge hit, especially among other writers. The poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge was so inspired that pieces of it surfaced in Kubla Khan and the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And the poet William Wordsworth loved it too. After William died that summer afternoon in 1823, word spread. And when the news reached Monticello, Thomas Jefferson picked up a pen and wrote a note of sympathy to William's niece on the loss of poor Billy. He said, "He is not gone. He remains everywhere around you. When you wish to find him, you have only to look in his garden, and in his work, and in his green world." And it was on this day, in 1936, that the English rose grower Peter Beales was born in Norfolk. He was raised by his grandparents, and during World War II, he was paid to gather rose hips from the hedgerows, boiled down to make a vitamin syrup for wartime rations. He married, started his own nursery, and then became a rose hunter, tracking down old roses his fellow Englishmen had forgotten. He searched in cottage gardens, in churchyards, and in forgotten corners of old villages. He liked to tell about the time he was on the island of Jersey. He was on his way to a lecture there when he spied a peach-colored climbing rose in a cottage garden, one he thought was lost to time. It had been bred in America in 1899, and it was called gardenia. But when he knocked on the door to speak to the homeowner, no one answered. And as he made his way out through the gate, the rose caught on his trousers, as if it were begging to be brought along. And that is how gardenia is still growing today, because of that cutting caught on Peter's trousers. He grew more than 1,200 varieties of roses in his nursery, including the largest collection of wild rose species in Britain. And he won 19 gold medals at Chelsea. In 1985, he wrote a book called Classic Roses. It was an instant hit, and rosarians couldn't do without it. When a copy wore out, they'd go and buy a new one. Peter Beales died in 2013 at the age of 76. And when he looked back on his life, he often said that his story began with a single rose he grew up admiring as a child. He said, "The one and only rose in my grandfather's garden was an ancient bush, which each year as I grew up flaunted her sweetly perfumed soft pink flowers and drew me to admire her. This subconscious youthful flirtation surely led to my lifelong career with her kind." In today's Unearthed Words, we hear from the British garden writer Ursula Buchan, who wrote about petunias in a piece for The Guardian published on this day, July 22nd, in 2000. Ursula first encountered petunias in 1973 when she was a young woman visiting Budapest, where she somehow landed in the garden of the British ambassador. His wife raved on and on about the petunias, which she loved all the more because the bloom kept going all summer long. Ursula couldn't help but agree. She was raised on roses and delphiniums, which bloomed for a couple of weeks and then faded. But after those Budapest petunias, Ursula was hooked. And since that time, she uses petunias all over, as ground cover, as fillers, and in pots on the step. And whenever someone calls petunias vulgar, too common, Ursula staunchly disagrees. They've proven to be too reliable, too obliging, and a lasting souvenir from that summer almost 50 years ago, when the only real crime of taste was the hideous brown t-shirt she wore a little too often. Over the years, plant breeders have tried to improve the petunia. Now there's the frilly doubles, the striped ones, and the electric colors with a dark vein down the middle. And through all the experiments, Ursula has stayed loyal. But even in a summer that's not been the greatest, she keeps them looking spiffy. Ursula said, "I still deadhead, but draggled, washed-out flowers regularly, for the look of it." It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Siftings by Jensen. We're at the midpoint of Old Books and Classics Week, and today's book is a short one, barely 120 pages, but it punches well above that. Jensen was a Danish-American landscape architect and conservationist. He designed many of the parks of Chicago, helped save the Indiana Dunes, and was friends with Frank Lloyd Wright. One admirer said he was the Thoreau of the 20th century. Siftings came out in 1939. It was part memoir, part nature writing, part philosophy. But at its core, it's a book about what it means to design with the land, not against it. Jen summed it up this way: "We all need the living green, or we'll shrivel up inside." One morning, the poet Vachel Lindsay stood in Jensen's doorway, watching the dawn light fall across the trees. There were a few hawthorns and crabapples and a gray dogwood at the edge. He said, "Such poems as this I cannot write." Jensen could not write them either. He grew them instead. Siftings by Jensen, a small book that changed the way people make gardens ever since its debut almost 90 years ago. And finally, here's something sweet to ignite the little botanic spark in your heart. It's the anniversary of the death of the English botanist Cardale Beales Babington, who died at his home in Cambridge on this day in 1895. He went up to St. John's College, where he got caught up in the craze for beetles, alongside Charles Darwin. He earned the nickname Beales after he consistently beat Darwin to the best ones. Darwin complained to his cousin, "I have caught Mr. Harbour letting Babington have the first pick of the beetles." They eventually became friends. For the next 6 decades, Beales became one of the finest botanists in England. He joined the botany department at Cambridge and spent 10 years creating a little guide called A Manual of British Botany. It was just small enough to slip into a pocket before heading out into the woods and meadows. It became the companion of a generation of amateur botanists. And because he'd included a section on ferns, it stayed in their pockets right through the Victorian fern craze. Cardale had a soft spot for underdogs. He helped establish a home for orphan girls. And he spent his final decades completely infatuated with brambles, rubus, the thorny, unlovable nuisance plants most gardeners try to get rid of. He was 57 when he married Miss Anna Maria Walker. Yet somehow, they still managed 29 years together. After Cardale died, Anna gathered his journals, his letters, his papers, and turned them into a 500-page memorial. But before she said a single word about the man she loved, she let a poem introduce him. She chose To the Bramble Flower by Ebenezer Elliott. Thy fruit full well the schoolboy knows, wild bramble of the brake. So put thou forth thy small white rose, I love it for his sake. How delicate thy gauzy frill, how rich thy branchy stem, how soft thy voice when woods are still, and thou sing'st hymns to them. As we close the show today, remember, we shape the garden, and given time, it shapes us right back when we aren't looking. Suddenly, after decades of swearing it isn't so, you love the daylily, and you've quietly poked the pincushion flower right off your top 10 list. And whether it's a gardener's prerogative or the evolution of a gardener, who's to say? Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.